Yep, that's kind of what I thought. Yep, it's frustrating, you know, the Wi-Fi comes in and out, and it's not just here, it's everywhere I go. I always have issues with the Zoom, mind you, but it's okay. We're going to make it work anyway. So, if you got cut off where we just were, we were talking about this invisible contract with the audience, right? Really talking about how what we show early on, the audience will assume that it'll matter later, and so you got to establish those signals and those patterns and everything like that to teach our viewer how to watch the film, really, right? How to take in this material. So now the second thing I want to talk about is a thing that I like to call emotional economy, right? Emotional economy. Understand, devise, carry out, and look at this thing we call emotional economy. Okay? Do more with less. All right, now I'm teaching you guys business. Do more with less. Okay? Minimal dialogue and simple actions can carry deep emotional meaning when placed intentionally. Okay? This is the power of emotional economy. Minimal dialogue and simple actions carry some of the most deep emotional meaning when it is placed intentionally. Okay? Do more with less. Sometimes, not all the time, because when I'm writing, I love dialogue. I'm not going to lie. I'm just a sucker for dialogue, and I'll usually go at length. Too much, though. You want to keep things real, folks. Sometimes, especially in a setting like what we established here with Mama and Son, there's not a lot of dialogue, but there's a lot of understanding. And so being intentional with the dialogue that you write is very important. Very important. Okay? Which then goes into our next little point here I have for you guys, is the power of the unfinished. Power of the unfinished. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, it's the unresolved elements in our story that create tension. Because the audience leans in when something is left incomplete. Okay? Unresolved elements create tension. Like the song, right? For example, she sings half the melody and burp, stops. She stops. And you're left wondering, right? The audience leans in, they're left wondering, because they're so curious about what is left incomplete. We're always looking for resolve as human beings. It's built in us. And so that's a great little tactic when you're doing this kind of scene. Another thing that we had talked about a little bit is presence, right? Let's talk about the presence before loss. The presence before loss. We want to build an emotional reality before introducing loss. Okay? Because without connection, loss has no impact. Without connection, loss has no impact. You ever have someone in your life die that you weren't connected to? Right? Maybe it didn't affect you as much. But the ones who did die who you were connected to affected you. Right? And so, breaking, without connection, loss has no impact. Right? And, there's something to be said about that. You can build connection and make loss mean something to you. Right? And so that's another thing that we're trying to do when we write this, is not only are we giving them the tools to do so, but we're encouraging them to think even deeper and maybe create meaning on their own ability. if they would be willing to do so, right? Okay? Presence before loss. Let's look at memory versus reality. Okay? These scenes, and scenes just in general, scenes can feel like memories, even as they happen. Okay? Everything that happens day to day creates memory, right? That's just science. So, we're creating a subconscious foreshadowing and an emotional distance. Okay? Because memory is coincide with reality, and we're creating the subconscious foreshadowing and emotional distance between our characters here. Let's look at the pattern recognition, right? Repetition creates expectation. So, breaking that pattern creates emotional impact. Okay, right? Having the repetition creates the expectation. So we break that. We break that. And that's what creates the emotional impact, because it throws us off guard. Now, see, we have expectation. We know what's going to happen. Okay? Now let's go into the spirituality of things here a little bit. Let's look at the quiet supernatural elements of this. You know, one thing you want to do, as you've seen in these scenes, is to avoid over-explaining, right? Suggest, especially when it comes to supernaturality, avoid over-explaining, right? It's something felt, not necessarily seen, right? So avoid over-explaining, suggest the supernatural through behavior rather, and tone, than through visuals or exposition. Again, don't do what I'm doing, right? I have to be repetitive because I teach the material, but when you're writing, you don't want to be repetitive. You don't want to over-explain, especially when it comes to something as fragile as supernaturality and having people connect to such. That is a very fragile thing. It doesn't always need to be explained, because honestly, things of supernatural ability cannot be explained, right? Which takes us into restraint. Restraint creates power. Trust your audience. Okay? Trust your audience. You need to write intentionally knowing that you can trust your audience. Because the less you force emotion when writing, the more the audience participates in creating it. Okay? Restraint. 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 It creates the power. Because we want the audience to participate. And we want them to be a part of the process of creating such. Right? Okay? So, another thing I want to talk about with these two scenes, and just in general, a basic good screenwriting theory. Character before concept. Okay? Big ideas only work when grounded in real human relationship. Okay? Always choose your character first before the concept, because these big ideas that we're trying to get people to download in their subconscious are all only going to work when they're grounded in relatable, real human relationships. Okay? It's all about that intentional intention. What are your intentions? Question yourself. What are your intentions? And how can you provide those to the audience? Well, one way is the character before the concept. Another way is meaning over plot, right? As we said earlier, you know, we are not setting up the plot, we are setting up what the audience will feel later. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about when it comes to the audience, is what can we help them, equip them to feel. Okay? Meaning over plot. Story is not about what just happens. It's about what it means. Right? The moral of the story, if you will. Focus on the emotional and thematic resonance. Okay? If I were to wrap all of this up, which I think, well, let me check the time here. Okay, I think we got a little more time. If I were to wrap all of this up, if you know, as I always say, if you go home not really getting any of this, this is the one thing you should go home knowing, is we are not just writing scenes here, folks. We are not just writing scenes. We are designing what the audience will carry with them after the film is over. We are creating legacy. We are creating emotional language that people will be able to carry on throughout their lives. They'll be able to reference. We are creating knowledge of emotional intelligence. Okay? We are not just writing scenes here. We want to leave the audience with something that will reward them throughout life. Hell, maybe even encourage them to start their own creative endeavors, especially for our generation. We have some of the most creative minds in our generation, but lack of inspiration, lack of motivation. And so you need to write intentionally to encourage, to inspire, to bring unity among people. Anyway, folks, so I think that's all I have for today. Those are our first two scenes of Voracity. Not Voracity, rather. A little later today, we'll have another class on some other stuff that we'll be working on. But, yeah, that's all we have for this morning. Thank you again for showing up. We did get the Canvas thing working, so these will be on Canvas. So stay tuned and go on there. Hopefully you took some notes as well. And yeah, I'm excited to go on this journey with you guys. This is a very sweet script. It's slowly becoming very close to my heart. I never expected the emotional impact of just the creation, the making of this script. And a lot of that is we are all doing it together. And that creates good memories, especially in this reality. Anyway, folks, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much. And until next time, you take care. You have a question? Yes. Okay, go ahead. Tell me. What was